Hi everyone, it's Sara, and welcome to our first full episode of Media from the Margins. If this is your first time tuning in, this is a brand new podcast that explores stories, ideas, and experiences that often live in the margins. We are five University of Guelph students partnering with the Guelph Resource Center for Gender Empowerment and Diversity, known as the acronym GRC, GED, or what we refer to as GERKID, and our on campus radio station, CFRU 93.3 FM, to open the door for discussion about topics related to mental health, accessibility, and healthy relationships. To stay up to date, you can give a follow to GERKID on Instagram at GRCGED, or you can also give us a sub on YouTube to be notified whenever a new episode comes out. Just to let you know, all the resources used for this podcast episode can be located in the description, and this includes campus resources as well. Now, on to what today's episode is really about. Renee, care to tell them?
Of course! Today we're exploring the topic of loneliness in university. It's a topic that many people don't actually talk about, but it's one that many of us have all had to deal with at some point or another. Sara and I will begin by talking about what it means to feel lonely, the difference between being alone and being lonely, and the prospects of using loneliness as a tool for introspection. David and Bea will follow by talking about the high school to university transition, the use of AI as therapy, and struggles with depression and anxiety. And lastly, the lovely Lindsay, who will be sharing resources that can be found on campus and advice for self-care. By the end of this episode, we'll hope you'll feel a little less alone. So grab a cozy blanket and maybe some tea too, and listen up.
So, what is loneliness? Interestingly, if you do a little Google search, you know how you get those definitions that pop up from Oxford Languages? Well, they have two definitions of being lonely. One being sadness because one has no friends or company, and the other being the quality of being unfrequented and remote, isolation. This is interesting because it names a single emotion, sadness, and it implies that being lonely means that you may not have friends or that you are isolated.
Well, we wanted to dig a little deeper for you guys, so we found an academic paper titled Loneliness, a Disease, and within it contained multiple ideas as to what else loneliness could be. There was one that defined it as a state of solitude, or being alone.
Another mentions how it isn't necessarily about being alone, but instead it's the perception of being alone and isolated that matters most, potentially making reference to the idea that loneliness isn't an emotion, but a state of mind.
There are also other definitions highlighted, such as an inability to find meaning in one's life, feeling negative and unpleasant, disconnectedness, etc. So it's clear that loneliness is a lot more nuanced than one may initially think. And we as university students are seemingly very especially vulnerable to its effects, since at least 70% of Canadian post-secondary students in 2019 reported feeling very lonely in the National College Health Assessment Survey. It's important to define loneliness and all its complexities in order to understand our own needs whenever loneliness may cloud our minds. This makes me curious as to which definition we should actually be following. Which definition resonates with you most, Sara?
Yeah, I think that our lived experiences can really shape our understanding of what loneliness means. Everyone might resonate with different definitions or even have their own definitions of loneliness. These definitions can also be impacted by everyone's own unique intersectional identities. I think highlighting loneliness as a state of mind, a perception, is interesting because part of me agrees with that and the other part also doesn't. I do think that the impact of loneliness is more severe depending on your perceived sense of aloneness, because sometimes you can feel lonely, even when you're not necessarily alone. It can be very easy to feel more isolated than you truly are. My issue, I guess, with labeling it a state of mind is the potential implication that overcoming loneliness is within your control or an internal issue. It could be potentially overlooking the systemic and structural barriers that prevent people from building community or feeling engaged. What do you think?
I personally don't like the idea that loneliness is a state of mind. Like you said, it implies that you can change your mindset and just live how you want to be despite the factors that made you lonely in the first place. It's a definition that only places sole blame on the victim and ignores the deeper reasoning behind it. That said, loneliness isn't always something that just happens. Actions such as neglecting relationships and being emotionally guarded can lead to loneliness as well. But loneliness doesn't mean alone. You could be emotionally guarded, have seemingly close relationships, and feel lonely all at once. I know this because this was me.
Yeah, I do know that in my experiences of being alone, it hasn't always been linked back internally or to a state of mind, but more so externally, like me being a Black student attending a predominantly white institution, which can be isolating in its own way. It can be hard to feel like I relate to people socially, and I find myself being on guard a lot, especially when approaching topics such as politics. I also have found myself feeling unsupported at times in my undergrad, such as moments when I am the only person to speak up about microaggressions in a room. It can feel exhausting to have to always have to feel like I have to explain myself or have it fall back on me to be the one advocating. For me, it's been really helpful to find welcoming spaces that prioritize the same values as me and make me feel more seen.
Yeah, I can't imagine the type of isolation you must feel. It's not only your outward appearance, but your different life experiences that the majority of white students can't relate to.
That's true. And the other aspect of the definition that I found interesting was naming the single emotion of sadness. It made me wonder if loneliness always feels like sadness, or if other emotions come up. For me, I feel like I do associate loneliness with sadness, but also emptiness or detachment. Sometimes loneliness comes with a sense of low self esteem as well, because I feel like I am less capable because I wonder, why can't I make friends like everyone else? But sometimes, even when I do make friends, I can still feel lonely. And I think that distinction between being alone versus being lonely is very important. I know that there are times in my life where I felt lonely even when I'm surrounded by people. During those type of situations, I feel like it has a lot to do with the depth of relationships you have. Do you feel safe and seen with the people around you? Do you feel like you can have open conversations with them? Do you feel unconditionally supported or even loved? These are things that, at least to me, feel vital for feeling less alone, which makes me feel less lonely too. However, when those qualities are missing, when you feel like you can't really talk to your friends about yourself, that's when loneliness truly hits.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's very important as university students to try to seek out friendships or relationships that meet our emotional needs. For some, this may be friends who you have a deep connection with, or friends that allow you to have fun and be laid back, or possibly even both. That said, it's not always easy to find or make those types of friendships, especially post pandemic where social dynamics have changed. People may be getting their social needs fulfilled online more so than in person. A recent study published in 2024 noted that face to face interaction is the best form of communication for increasing well being, and that no other forms, such as voice calling or online messaging, had the same effect. The discussion also noted that even though virtual communication could increase social connection, they could also cause a decrease in positive emotions.
Huh, that's interesting. The study then goes to highlight that although no form of virtual interaction can fully replace face to face interaction, virtual interactions may be better than no interaction at all. From our personal experience, I feel like virtual interaction has definitely become more relevant, with its pros and cons. The virtual space makes it a lot easier to reach out to people who have close interests to you, especially if they are niche. It also makes communication easier. Sometimes it just feels like there's less to worry about, like not having to be mindful of your appearance or the way you show up. It can be very easy to tailor your online persona to your liking. On the other hand, these forms of communications don't always translate well in person, and you may miss out on real life experiences. There are also some dangers, such as algorithms creating an echo chamber, or the normalization of toxic online behavior such as homophobia, racism, or misogynistic groups, for example, incels.
It's also important to acknowledge that making friends online can sometimes feel a lot easier than in person. How many of you listeners have heard advice like go to clubs or go to events or even linger around campus as advice to combat loneliness in university? Well, that advice can be helpful, but only if you know how to get relationships started. I know, at least for me, going to clubs isn't going to instantly get me a group of friends. I'll have to be outgoing and figure out how to engage with the group of people that feel like I'm intruding on. Same goes for classrooms. Unless you're a first year in a first year class, on the very first day of classes, everyone seems to become a pair or a trio or a group next to instantly. I'm hoping others have felt like this too, but this is why turning to the internet to make friends seems much more manageable. There's no visual, ready made friends that you'll feel bad about intruding on. So you're just able to talk and be yourself in a community that you chose to be part of. The only problem with online friends is that pesky face to face interaction that we need. But if you feel safe to do so and have taken all the precautions necessary to ensure you'll be safe, why not take the friendship to a coffee shop or a retro video game store like I did?
I can definitely understand and relate to you. I remember feeling super overwhelmed in first year, especially during a week because it felt like it was my only window to make friends. It was difficult watching everyone seemingly transition into their new friend groups and feeling left behind. Even now, with second and third year, it can be extremely daunting to push myself out there. It can be easy to put in the effort to make friendships, but sometimes it sucks when it just simply feels like it's not working out.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Another factor we want to quickly touch upon is the benefits that may come with spending a little extra time with yourself. While loneliness itself can be heavy to deal with, being alone is not always bad. It can allow you time for lots of introspection and change. It also can allow you to be more proactive in making efforts to build relationships and give you time to explore or grow your hobbies, to just generally learn about yourself. With some balance, it can also give you a new sense of independence. It's important, though, to have a healthy balance of alone time and time spent with others. Personally, for me, being alone has taught me that I like quietness, late night walks, and journaling. It has also forced me to get to know myself better, especially when it comes to things I value, such as being authentic, warm hearted, and passionate. I like being alone because it makes me feel like I can be more myself.
Oh, that's awesome. I've had a similar experience with making the most out of being alone. I had a lot of time to myself in high school, and through this alone time, I was able to discover that I love writing. This even led me to join a writing club, which, if I didn't have bad social anxiety, could have led me to make some more friends. Speaking of introspection, Sarah and I would like to leave you with some reflection. What does loneliness mean to you, and how would you define it?
What is your personal relationship with the difference between being alone versus being lonely?
And what are some benefits you have gained from having alone time?
We actually had a chance to ask UFG students these questions, and we would like to just read out their answers.
For what loneliness means to you, one student said, "Loneliness to me means having a lack of a support system, feeling as though you are going through life alone." While another student said, "Loneliness feels like you have no one that supports you or people you can go to when you need someone."
For the difference between loneliness and being alone, students answered, being alone is physical, like feeling like you're the only one in the room, versus being lonely is more psychological, like feeling as though you have no friends or family you can rely on or turn to.
Another student answered, "I love being alone. I enjoy my own company, and I think you need to know how to be alone in order to understand yourself. Being lonely is more of a helpless feeling. To me, it feels like you have no one to talk to when you don't want to be alone. There are times when I feel lonely even though I have friends and family. It's just this existential feeling, like no one is there for you."
And lastly, for the benefits you have gained from having alone time, students said that having alone time helps them recharge their social battery, increase focus for schoolwork, and allow time to sit with their own thoughts. Another student mentioned allowing time for productivity in life and school and doing things that make them happy without fear of judgment from others, as well as reflecting on the kind of person they are. Others' answers included learning to be independent, problem solve issues, and understanding themselves better. And with that, we would like to pass it on to B and David to dig deeper into loneliness.
Thanks, y'all. That was super informative. Now, B and I are going to be talking about AI use as a tool for therapy and the transition from high school to uni. So, before all that, though, drawing on my own personal experience, I remember coming to Guelph as a first year student and feeling like a small fish in a big ocean full of people. And it was kind of daunting at first, to be honest. I tried doing intramural sports like three pitch and also some drop in sports like basketball or skating, but nothing really seemed to mesh for me. My mom would give me advice like, "Did you try talking to people in lectures before class and introduce yourself and all that?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I did try these things, but these connections would only last like the duration of the class, and it was tough. I do remember feeling like no matter where I turned to, I couldn't make a lasting connection with someone that went beyond the classroom in whatever 50-minute or hour 20 lecture I did have. I also remember thinking to myself, I know I'm not the only person in this boat. Like, I genuinely know that there are people feeling the way I am feeling right now, but where are they? Where are these people? Everyone seems to know someone who knows someone who knows someone, and on and on and on. And it was just tough. I think one of the hardest things about feeling alone in university is knowing, like I just said, that there are definitely people out there who feel the same way, but not knowing really where to find these people or where they are.
That's so true, David. If you're ever on social media a lot, you see all these like big friend groups that look like they're having so much fun, but in reality, they have their own problems. Like it's not what it seems. Some of them might be feeling like they don't click with the whole group, but they're not really sure where to find the people they actually like. They're just going along with it. This is your daily reminder, by the way, that social media is fake. David, do you eventually find people that can relate to you or what?
I definitely tried to lean on my friends back home at first when I first transitioned from high school to uni. And I remember they were also going through the same problems that I was, which was kind of this accessibility problem, trying to find all these people, these friends that you want to make. Like you crave it so desperately, it's just hard. So in that way, we helped each other get through this moment by sharing our own personal experiences of trying to meet others. But on that same note, there was a friend group that I did have actually in high school, but I didn't feel like I belonged to it anymore. Like as I was transitioning from high school to university, and it was kind of tough because I kind of tried to intentionally isolate myself from them. And it can be tough choosing between wanting to have interactions with people just for the sake of wanting these interactions. But at the same time, you kind of feel like you're compromising your own mental health and being a bit disingenuous to yourself and your own image. So I kind of had to go through that balancing act of figuring out, do I actually want these friends for who they are, or do I need them kind of to supplement my own mental health right now? And what are the pros and cons of both these? It's kind of a tough time. I really had to evaluate my own position in this friend group and decide if I wanted to stay, and it was kind of tough going through that. With that said, I did end up making friends in residence, which did take a bit of time to be honest, but it all worked out in the end. I started dating my girlfriend of now 3 years. Shout out Mariah, hello. But there were definitely some growing pains from coming from high school to here that definitely made me feel lonely and isolated.
I can guarantee you are not the only one who struggled at first. Me personally, I did as well. Did anyone ever tell you that uni is the greatest time of your life, or was that just me?
Oh no, without a doubt. Like it always feels like when you're going into university, there feels like there's this one valid, stereotypical, prototypical university experience that everyone needs to strive to achieve, but at the same time, you kind of get faced with the reality that that's actually not what it's like. And just because it's portrayed like that in media, that's not what your life actually is going to be.
It's a ridiculous amount of pressure they put on us when we first get here.
Yeah, no, for sure. What was your experience like, B, coming to university?
So, like I just said, I had a lot of expectations going into university. I actually had a lot of expectations going from high school, um, based on every teen movie where there's like this awesome party and everyone's having so much fun and there are no problems. It's so
Mm-hmm.
exciting every weekend, and everyone cares so much about that big football game. They're all wearing their football leather jackets and
Yeah.
cheering. That never happened in my high school. Because once I got to high school, and realize it's a lot less dramatic and incredible as the media says it's going to be. I sat through those 4 years waiting for uni to be that amazing experience I never got. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert, times in your life are only amazing if you make the effort to actually put yourself out there. Life doesn't just magically change because you put yourself into a new environment. You have to like actively make choices and changes. I'm sure I'm not the only person who thought university would be immediately filled with long lasting friendships. I mean, David just said he was like that too. Just because you live in residence and attend class, you have to get the courage to turn to your neighbor in a lecture hall and actually say hello. Then, because your class sizes are probably 300 people in the first year, you have to find a way to keep in touch because you're probably not going to by chance randomly sit next to them in the following class.
Yeah, no shot. This was especially hard when having like large general science classes in Rosansky 104, 101, these like big daunting lecture halls. It made it feel impossible. I genuinely thought I would be like annoying people or if I'd be weird by turning to them saying, "Hey, how's your day going? What other class do you have? What program you're in?" Kind of like the type of conversations we've all have gone through trying to meet people at the beginning of a class that sometimes maybe you feel like you're overdoing yourself or you're making a wrong impression here or there.
I bet people were hoping that you'd turn to them in class and talk to them, David. Like you should have just done that. They were probably thinking the exact same thing, and at some point one of the two of you just has to be the one to do it first. Like that's just the reality. So this huge school environment, this is where university differs from high school, and this is where the loneliness sets in. I think it's harder to make new friends in university because you're not stuck in the same small class sizes, in the same small school, every day for 4 years where you see the same people. In university, like I said, you have to choose to see the same people. This hit me like a truck in first year because I thought friendships would just fall into my lap. Felt like I was doing university like wrong because I hadn't found my people on day one and spent a lot of the time with acquaintances rather than really good friends just to kind of like fill that initial void. This started to change when I joined the Dragon Boating Club, shout out to you guys, and put myself in situations where I'd see the same people regularly. I was also open to becoming friends with other people, other people's friends who I knew, so like friends of friends. Because some people I'm closest to in my life right now came from a mutual person that actually neither of us are friends with anymore. I had to be open to every new experience, and I had to learn to say yes to spontaneous plans.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like that potluck dinner we had when we first formed this podcast group and we met each other, right?
And now we're all like best friends. So if you've had this similar experience, you're probably like, wow, okay, now I have some friends, but I'm still feeling lonely. Yep, because for a lot of people, being in uni is more than just the school environment. You're living alone for like the first time. You're having to figure out all these changes like grocery shopping and meal prepping and working out and getting a part time job. There is literally not enough hours in the day to do all of this. A lot of these things are solitary tasks or things you don't bring your lab chem partner slash new friend Billy to unless he really likes watching other people grocery shop, which, fun fact, my roommate does really like watching people grocery shop, so I'm thankfully never alone for that.
So, hopefully, this makes you all realize that your podcast hosts have all been lonely throughout their university careers too, or had these small little bouts of feeling in similar ways that maybe you were feeling. So, you may be thinking it's just random chance that you've gone through this, but it is kind of a true reflection of what a university student experience could look like, without a shadow of a doubt. Nope, we all reached out to hear. Oh, we actually all reached out to some student voices on these topics, and we got back some excellent answers. B and I asked, "What are some strategies you have to combat loneliness, and how does loneliness impacted you and your view of yourself and/or your mental health at some point?"
So here were the answers to the first question, completely anonymous. Someone said, as someone who never lived on campus, I never really felt like I belonged at school. For me, loneliness itself blocked me from becoming less lonely. It's like quicksand. The lonelier you are, the harder it is to break free. They said, find the bravery to do it alone, and you'll take the first step out of that trap. Very wise, very
Very nice.
wise. And then someone else said, as someone who at times feels lonely and isolated from friends or family, I find the best way to combat loneliness is to treat myself, whether it's to go shopping or cook myself a really good meal. Keeping myself busy helps keep me distracted from the sadness I feel when I'm lonely.
And here's what our listeners had to say about question number 2. There have been times when I felt very lonely and my mental health was at a low, but over time you find your support and it becomes easier. And then another person said, thankfully, I've never felt too lonely in my lifetime. Though in cases where I have actually felt lonely, it makes me less willing to share my thoughts and feelings when someone is actually asking me because I assume they don't actually care. I tend to bottle up my emotions and have a fear and anxiety of burdening people with my thoughts, which is something very, very relatable.
Thank you, everybody, for putting in those answers. We're actually going to be doing more audience engagement in our upcoming episodes. We've put out a Google form where you can go ask questions to our upcoming interviewees, so go check that out. Now that we've talked about loneliness, we're going to discuss how this loneliness and general changes to our mental health can impact healthy relationships, especially when dealing with disabilities.
Yeah, so it's important to recognize that both visible and invisible disabilities play a large role in being able to build and sustain healthy relationships. So we often focus on the impact of loneliness in our mental health, but we also need to discuss the impact of our mental health and our ability to maintain these healthy relationships.
Wait. Just so everyone's on the same page, how do you distinguish between invisible and visible disabilities?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a really important one too. So visible disabilities usually have a clear outward signs that you're able to see, whereas invisible ones might manifest themselves in ways that are a bit more subtle and a bit harder to see.
Okay. So let me try this. An example of a visible disability might be someone with like a mobility issue where an invisible disability might be someone with a learning impairment or a mental health condition?
Yeah, exactly. You got it. So individuals have either invisible disabilities or both. Also important to emphasize, or both. And they potentially face different stigmas and challenges between each of these different lineages, which affect their ability to create and maintain relationships with others, all in different ways.
Okay, so now that I'm starting to understand, I think it's also important to keep in mind that even though visible disabilities might be easier to identify, it doesn't mean that they face more severe challenges. Both individuals who have visible and invisible disabilities face challenges relative to their lived experience, and it's not possible to quantify as one being harder when it comes to making friendships. That's right, right?
Yeah, no, that's an amazing point. You got it.
I hope this proves that you aren't alone and that many other people struggle with loneliness and mental health. You may even be struggling with your mental health beyond just loneliness and have some experience with anxiety or depression. Rest assured, you are not alone either. It's been said that roughly 20% of Canadian youth under the age of 25 experience a mental illness. That's 1 out of 5 students you see walking around on campus. And I've been diagnosed with anxiety my entire life, so if you don't know anyone who's struggling like you are, I get it. I'm here for you.
Yeah, it's really hard in university to be like one of those cheesy t-shirts you always see where it's like keep calm and carry on with like a griffin slapped on the t-shirt too, where there's always something around every corner that's like bound to actually not make you feel like that.
And it's always exam season. It's always stressful. We have midterms and finals and big projects for up to 5 classes at once. That's so much work. To you listening right now, you're doing great. It is a lot of work. I've also found it's really intense to go from high school grades and academic expectations to university. If I got less than a 95% in high school, I'd be inconsolable. But I passed an exam in university, I'm kissing the floor of the lecture hall with tears of joy in my eyes. That is not an exaggeration. Does this make me anxious that I won't get into grad school? Yes. Do I have to remind myself that life is more than just grades on a daily basis? Also, yes. Being anxious can be very isolating, and so can depression. The thing about loneliness and depression is it can be cyclical. Being isolated and lonely can cause symptoms of depression, and depression can cause loneliness through isolation. This isolation then turns and exacerbates feelings of depression.
Anxiety and depression are often what therapists deal with, right? I know it can be expensive from my own personal experience, but is there anything that U of G does offer to help this?
Actually, yes. GERCED, GRCGED, offers drop-in peer support for people experiencing personal or academic crises, or both. So go check them out.
Great. We'll have some of those linked in the description of this video or this podcast. But now we kind of want to pivot and talk about a really interesting and kind of new approach to therapy that does exist in the world, and that is through AI. So because of all of us have gone through our bouts of feeling alone, we want to talk about this use of AI as a therapy tool, since it is a very prominent topic facing people of all different identities. Literature currently shows that nearly 50% of individuals who would benefit from therapeutic resources and services are actually unable to reach them. That was a Stanford study that showed this. That is to say, our goal here is not to make a definitive claim as to what is right or wrong for you as a person, not at all. We simply want to highlight the pros and cons of using AI-centered therapy and what this might mean for you, as well as the benefits of supplementing it with person-to-person emotional support that does exist.
As Renee said earlier in this podcast, online communication does provide like a less formal interaction where individuals can remain anonymous, but humans are social animals, and having person-to-person interaction has its benefits too. It's literally in our DNA. Later, Lindsay's going to talk about some on-campus resources, which might circumvent the need for using AI-centered therapy. But for now, let's focus on the AI use.
Some of you listening right now might be going through a bout of loneliness yourself, or might know someone who has told you that they've used AI to regulate their emotions and seek advice. I think that if someone does confide in you this, it is best that you do not judge them in this case, and that you approach the situation with as much empathy and compassion as possible, because this is a very vulnerable time for them to be opening up about their emotional state.
That's so true, David. You might not know everything going on in their life, and the best thing to try to do in this situation is be empathetic. One of the main reasons why people turn to AI chatbots as a source of therapy is just simply the convenience of it. Like it's right there on every device.
Yeah, exactly. What we're seeing here is a very unique overlap of things like emotional distress, lack of accessibility, and the convenience of AI, which are all culminating together to potentially, and I want to stress the word potentially here, provide emotional relief for someone. Now, I say potentially because it has been suggested in some studies that AI chatbots may help in alleviating symptoms of anxiety and depression. But as we all know through our own use of AI in a public domain is still in its infancy. Keep in mind, ChatGPT was only released in late November of 2022. That's pretty recent. So much of the research underlying its use and efficacy regarding mental health is still fairly new and has not been studied over a long period of time. Researchers are only now starting to discover the perceived benefits, risks, and dangers of use of AI as a therapeutic tool, and because of this, we don't really know the long-term effects of AI-centered therapy. With that said, though, let's look at the pros and cons of what we do currently know as suggested by the current literature. Many of the benefits of using AI as a therapeutic tool come from the anonymity that comes along with it. It has been shown that in academic studies, people who use AI therapy often feel more comfortable sharing with a computer, as the lack of human judgment allows for them to be more candid in sharing their emotions. The more honest exchanges can lead to a deeper understanding of evaluating oneself, and because of this, can actually reduce the self stigma of sharing one's emotions, which is really interesting. In my own experience with therapists, and what I have often heard from time with my friends, family, you need to find a therapist that is quote unquote right for you. In some cases, AI therapy can provide the perceived perfect therapist to individuals who feel pressured by human therapists to reveal parts of themselves that aren't fully comfortable with sharing these things about their identity or their emotions.
Right. Me personally, I went through 6 therapists to find the one I'm currently on, so do not give up hope. That also makes sense because having that continued access of talking with AI will make the connection even stronger.
Exactly. But now let's look at some of the cons in addition to the fact that many of these studies are in their infancy, as I mentioned before. I'm sure that no one is surprised when I say this, but AI can be extremely biased, even when it relates to mental health care. Biases can arise from the data used to train AI models, leading to unequal treatment of individuals based on different factors like race, gender, socioeconomic status, and thus perpetuating existing disparities in mental health care, which we don't want. Laura Bunskill, a professional social worker at Innerworks Therapy in London, Ontario, has her master's in social work and has said that computers are sort of programmed to be binary, to be yes or to be no, this and that, kind of black and white. What they don't do well is nuances, and mental health therapy is all about the nuances.
You have to be using critical thinking skills when you use AI. You can't just take everything they say exactly as they say because, like David's saying, they don't understand the in betweens. They don't understand enough context in your life to tell you exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's also important to note that there's some elements of therapy that AI bots just cannot replicate at all. For example, Laura, the doctor I just mentioned before, also notes that there are just some therapeutic treatments that AI is incapable of replicating. For example, she notes that eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also what is known as EMDR, which is when a person moves their eyes back and forth when thinking of a traumatic effect, is just something that AI just is unable to pick up on.
That's really interesting, actually. I didn't know that. Are there any problems with maybe sharing too much information? Like, should I be concerned that AI knows everything about me and I should maybe stop telling them my personal anecdotes?
Yeah, absolutely. So another expert, Dr. Luke Stark, a professor and researcher at Western University, does research regarding the social impacts of AI and has found that more descriptive prompts used for AI therapy, they might yield more helpful responses that are tailored to an individual's needs. But with that said, the level of description that's needed for these types of prompts to give advice that is relatable to the person would often be using information that is better left being kept to yourself in private thought.
So, how can we use the best of AI and human strategies in order for people to get the kind of like the best of both worlds?
Yeah, it's a great question. Completely great question, fair question. The future of AI as a mental health tool is actually a really interesting frontier that is only starting to get discovered. As we said earlier, having the convenience of quick access to chatbots allows for patients to get access to critical mental health care when they need it the most. With that said, this frontier needs to be approached with cautious optimism and skepticism, as well as delicacy. Patients can sometimes feel overwhelmed with their human therapist, so having an anonymous tool that can help decipher terms or mental health jargon that maybe might be new to them that can serve as a practical application of AI. It can also maybe be beneficial to make aware that your human therapist, that it might make sense to tell your human therapist that you're supplementing your in-person care and emotional support with an AI chatbot. There's one anecdote that I read while looking at a CBC article, which again, linked in the description below if you want to check it out, of someone using AI as ways to kind of plan their day out in ways to mitigate their own stress or anxiety regarding planning events. So these are effective ways that it can be used. Asking AI for grounding techniques as well when you're feeling stressed, and then telling your in-person therapist how AI has impacted your experience with these grounding techniques opens up a new door of therapeutic strategies for you to discuss with your therapist and your chatbot. So again, we're just really kind of trying to emphasize the interplay that benefits that when you supplement one with another.
Okay, so David and I have talked about our own loneliness. We've talked about the audience's loneliness. We've talked about mental health, anxiety, and depression. Talked about AI as a therapeutic tool. And now the most important part of this podcast is Lindsay with the resources that can help you.
So what does it really mean to take care of ourselves, and what resources do we have here at the University of Guelph to help us do that? On campus, there are many supports available for students. The Wellness Education Center in the University Center offers workshops, peer support, and programs to help you build skills for everyday wellness. Student Wellness Services connects you to counseling, accessibility services, and healthcare. There's also the Student Support Network, Multi-Faith Resource Team, the Griffin's Lounge, the Here 24/7 Crisis Line if you ever need someone to talk to at any time, and, best for last, how could I ever forget about our favorite resource on campus, GurkEd. But taking care of your mental health isn't just about asking for help when things get hard. It's also about the small, consistent choices that help you feel grounded and whole. A big part of that is reflected in what's called the 7 dimensions of wellness, an approach that recognizes that well-being isn't just one single thing, but a balance of many interconnected areas of our lives, which can all help us take care of our mental health. Emotional wellness, for starters, is about being aware and accepting your feelings and knowing when to reach out for support. Environmental wellness reminds us that the spaces around us, like clean air, green spaces, and a sense of safety, affect how we feel, and that caring for the environment can also be a form of self-care. Intellectual wellness is about staying curious and engaged, learning inside and outside the classroom, trying new things, and letting creativity be a part of your growth. Occupational wellness means finding meaning and satisfaction in the work that you do, whether that's a job, a volunteer role, or even in your studies. Physical wellness involves taking care of your body through movement, rest, good nutrition, and paying attention to what it needs. Social wellness is about connection, spending time with other people who make you feel safe and seen, and contributing to a community that supports one another, kind of like this podcast. And spiritual wellness is about meaning, asking questions, finding purpose, and appreciating the things that we can't always explain. All of these dimensions are connected. That's why medicine isn't always something you take from a bottle. Sometimes medicine looks like movement, fresh air, music, or laughter. Sometimes it's a hug, a good meal, a safe relationship, or the consistency of a routine that helps you feel steady. Joining a club or group on campus can also be a part of that, by helping you find your people, your place, and the joy that comes with belonging. So, as the semester goes on, I hope you, podcast listeners, take care of your mental health in all of these ways. Use the resources around you, but also listen to what makes you feel most alive. Your mental health is made up of so many dimensions, and every single one of them deserves your care.
Hi everyone, it's Sara here, and thank you so much for giving a listen to our first full episode of Media from the Margins. We hope that you were able to feel less alone, and we hope that you were able to learn something new. We do have some pretty exciting episodes coming out that are interviews, so please keep a lookout for those. Feel free to give us a sub on YouTube at GRCGED or follow GurkEd on Instagram at GRCGED. Until next time, bye!